Hello and welcome to our review for Deathloop, developed by Arcane Studios and published by Bethesda Softworks, released the 13th of September 2021 for $59.99 in both the UK and North America. Alright, I suppose I should get my bias out of the way before we go anywhere else. I was always kind of predisposed to liking this game in some ways. I've been a fan of Arcane's output since I first played Dishonored way back when I was in college. Dishonored is one of my favorite series as a result, and the Deathloop trailers grabbed me by the throat from the very first one that I saw and had me grinning every time I saw a new one. I know some were bothered by the oversaturation of trailers showing up at every event, but I was always pleased by it and understood the desire to push the game hard since their games have never been absolute juggernauts in terms of sales before. Despite delays, this has been one of my most anticipated games of the year, so I was quick to take on this review when I got the chance. So let's see if Deathloop is able to wow me in the way I really hoped it would. In Deathloop, the player takes the role of Colt Vaughn, an amnesiac who wakes up on the shoreline of Black Reef, an island that houses all sorts of people who are there either to party or for personal pursuits. It quickly becomes clear that the entire island is trapped in a single-day time loop, the same day repeating over and over again. He quickly meets Juliana, a woman who is very eager to kill him for initially unknown reasons. Colt is none too fond of being stuck in this loop, though, and sets out to break it off and get free. This means taking out each of the 7 visionaries that serve as leaders of Black Reef. These range from a few scientists who are out to figure out the secrets of this anomalous place, to artists who are here to have a good time, to one very annoying cannibal. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the characters in this game, but I was glad to see that they all have a ton of personality and every single one of them is distinct and fun to interact with and chase down. Reading their notes and listening to their audio logs is not only a treat in terms of information learned, but also from getting to know more of their strong personalities. The masked grunts that populate the levels aren't any slouches either. Their passive dialogue can be really fun to listen to at times, and all the time I was coming across these side characters doing interesting things, like waiting for a game to start, or lining up boxes to make dominoes with a mine at the end. The fact that they were all aware they're in a time loop leads to some pretty chaotic behavior, because they all know they'll be back tomorrow. That being said, Juliana and Colt, recent forgetfulness aside, are the only ones who actually remember the repetition. Everyone else thinks it's just the first day of the loop, but it's been years. Figuring out the secrets of Black Reef is half the fun of the game, of course. It's all about the journey here. However, I did find myself a little let down by the ending. It's not that the ending is bad, far from it, but it's more that it feels a bit cut off. There are multiple endings that you can get depending on some final choices, each having very different outcomes. However, what comes after those final choices is devilishly short. Frequently, what comes after the loop is broken, do you know, is a question posed by Juliana to Colt when trying to sway him away from his goal, but the ending does not deliver on that for us. Sure, the openness of the endings means the player can decide for themselves. However, I think the game could have done with even a short epilogue for each ending to give the whole thing a little more closure than it currently has. This game is one that I think is a little hard to fully categorize. It's not a roguelike or a roguelite, since there are ways to keep some items from one loop to another, and there is progression from loop to loop in service of finding the solution. It's a puzzle game in some ways, though not in the traditional sense. I mean, most puzzle games don't have this much running and gunning. It's not a stealth game, not entirely. Stealth is a valid strategy, but it's not the only one. It's not a first-person shooter either. If you go in expecting the controls of Doom or Call of Duty, you're going to end up leaving disappointed. Deathloop is a bit of a beast of its own, and I think that's something that could leave some coming out of it disappointed because they went in thinking it was one thing when it really isn't that. You need to set your expectations before you start. This is a game that is in many ways an immersive sim, though it is a somewhat more linear one than most. There is choice in tactic and how you choose to proceed with the ending. There is choice in what information you choose to go after first and how many extra loops you spend exploring the world of the game. However, there's only one golden loop solution that will allow you to finally break the loop. It's a more restrictive immersive sim than most of its brethren, but it is one nonetheless. As Colt, you're going to be going through the same loop over and over and over again. That feels like a get repetitive, but it's really not. There are 4 different areas that you can enter and 4 different times of day that you can enter them. 2 of these areas are always available, and 2 of them have one time of day that you won't be able to go in, mostly because there's nothing to do at that time anyway. Each time that you enter one of the areas, time does not move while you are in it, but leaving will progress you to the next stage of the day. So you get one shot at morning, noon, afternoon, and evening in each loop, which you can spend doing various combinations of the areas. Each of these will have different areas within the area open at different times of day, depending on if one of the visionaries is present. Each of these areas can have some pretty big differences in things you can do at one time that affect later portions of the daily loop, only for it to reset in the evening. The real mantra here is that knowledge is power. Not only is it important that you learn where the visionaries are going to be and what methods you can use to get in close to them, but you'll need to know the lay of the land too. Playing each of the areas so much means you're going to get to have a very intimate knowledge of them, and that will make all the difference. You'll go from fumbling your way across the map to running across it with ease without alerting a single enemy. One thing I think Deathloop could have done with was a difficulty selection. Don't get me wrong, the game isn't the easiest thing in the world, but Arcane did opt for an adaptive AI. Enemies will barely notice you in the tutorial before they ramp up when the game opens you up to more choice. In the morning, everyone is drinking and lazy, since no one's really aware of your assault on the loop just yet. While this is fun, those who are used to playing other Arcane titles might find the game lacks some challenge. Of course, you can always self-impose rules on yourself, such as not using any of the supernatural powers or only using basic strength guns, but those don't change how aware enemies are or how much damage they can take. They have had difficulty selection before, so I don't know why they chose to go completely without it this time around. The difficulty curve can feel pretty smashed quickly when you manage to infuse 3 powerful weapons in an early loop and can just roll with those the rest of your time playing. The one thing that might really give you a run for your money is that other players can invade your game as Juliana with the goal of ruining whatever plans you have going on. These players are going to be much more clever than the grunts of the game and have a much better arsenal than them too. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are going to claim going up against another player is unbalanced in favor of one character or the other. Now, I do think that things are a little weighted depending on the situation and the level, but both characters have their advantages and disadvantages. Juliana might have a more stacked arsenal, but she only has 1 life and that's it. Colt may have a disadvantage in that there are more enemies against him and his arsenal might not be as strong early in the game, but he can die 3 times, meaning that his players have more of a margin of error. The real problem with the multiplayer is that the matchmaking is a little bit rough. You see, Juliana can only spawn on maps where there is one of the visionaries present, meaning that some of the levels that a Colt can choose cannot have a Juliana. Currently, wait times as Juliana can vary wildly. Some days I can get into a match within a minute or 2, and others I may be waiting several minutes and playing a game on my phone. It's a matter of supply and demand, and I worry that as more people finish the story mode of the game, there will be an excess of those wanting to play as Juliana without the Colts needed to match them. That's especially worrying, considering playing many matches as Juliana is how you can unlock alternate skins for both her and Colt. Don't get me wrong, I do really like the tension that having Juliana after you injects into the game, since Juliana players are more unpredictable and you can always opt out into an AI Juliana who's still smarter than the average grunt. But I do worry about the longevity of this game mode once players have started moving on to their next game. Alright, this is the one I had seen people be divisive about before release, the look of the game. I have never come to Arcane for the most high fidelity graphics in the world. They're one of my go-to examples on how you can make something look great by focusing on art style over the need to be able to see every pore in a character's face. Nobody in this game looks real, but they all look good. They chose an art direction and they stuck with it. The character design of the Visionaries alone is stellar, all of them having a striking look that lets you pick them out of a crowd, except for the one where they're meant to blend in until you figure it out. There are also a lot of great animations, from grunts throwing rocks when they're bored to characters dancing stupidly at a party. I think that a lot of the work done with the setting was really amazing too. It's not quite steampunk or something like that, but everything has this wonderful mod fashion inspired aesthetic. The time loop started in the 1960s and the game really wants to make you aware of that. Orange may be the color of the day, but everything about Black Reef is just dripping in colors and bold shapes. It makes for an area that is not only visually interesting to look at, but also has a lot of really fun level geometry to explore. The cherry on top is the short 2D animated cutscenes that play when you figure out a vital piece of the puzzle. They're not long at all, but they make a wonderful addition that marked progress. The music is a little on the sparse side here, kicking in mostly in contextually important locations or when you start a bout of combat with some of the NPCs. The music that is there is great, which had me wishing there was a little more variety to it. However, this is made up for by the sound design in every other aspect of the game. Gunshots feel punchy and have impact, and while I was hearing them a lot, I didn't feel like they were getting repetitive. My personal favorite touch was the way that music and voices become slightly muffled when using the power that grants temporary invisibility. I have to give the biggest shout out that I can to the vocal cast of this game. Everyone does a really great job embodying the character that they're playing, but a very special mention has to go out to the actors for Colt, Jason E. Kelly, and Juliana, Azioma Akaga. The banter between these two comes off as so natural that you believe the two of them have done this 100 times before. It's undeniably one of the best aspects of the game. Kelly in particular is a really fun time as Colt. He doesn't make him into this super stoic action man that we've seen in so many action games. Instead, Colt feels like an average guy. One with exceptional weapon skills, sure, but a more average than most in his reactions to the insanity around him. I mean, when another version of Colt tells him that he needs to be smart about what he's doing and not just shoot everything, I believe Colt when he says, "But I like shooting everything." The game is technically very sound, but it's not exactly perfect. While I never ran into any glitches myself, there were a few moments where the physics engine wasn't supposed to fling a body as hard as it ended up doing. There's also just some oversights here and there on how things interact. I feel like you shouldn't be able to just stun lock enemies by kicking them over and over and over again. The only glitch that I would call attention to in specific is the way the lighting and shadows can sometimes get a little funny. It's something that you'll usually see out of the corner of your eye for just a second, but there were moments where I was able to just sit and stare at a strange dancing shadow. It's not anything major, but it is a little oversight that likely could have been caught a little sooner. In contrast, the DualSense integration was really great, as it has been for all the PlayStation-focused titles that I've experienced. I think that it could have done with some options to adjust, though. While I loved being able to feel Colt's footsteps in my controller, I know that might not be the case for everyone. However, feeling the vibrating air pressure of the nail gun was something that I adored. Not to mention the way that the trigger would lock up when my gun's jammed to give me a physical feedback. For me, Deathloop is a Game of the Year contender. It's been one of my favorite games this year, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with it. There are some aspects that I am willing to personally overlook because other aspects excite me so much. That being said, when I look at Deathloop properly for this review, I cannot let some of these issues slide. Understand that I highly recommend this game for people who may have liked Arkane's prior work, but you may not be able to personally overlook some of the flaws, or may in fact take more issue with them than I do. I don't begrudge anyone who would give this game a perfect score based on their personal experience of the game. But despite the love that I have for it, I think placing it among Big Daddy Gaming's favorite children rather than the golden ones is a more fair assessment. Pros: fun to explore in vibrant world, excellent characters in both design and vocal performance, fun and engaging gameplay and story elements, interesting use of time loop mechanics. Cons: could use the ability to tweak the difficulty. Ending could use a touch more expansion. Unclear on the longevity of the online aspects. Our verdict is that Deathloop is one that I will be playing over and over and over again, but some may take large issues with some of the chinks in the armor of this game, which is why we are giving this game our rating of Favorite Child.
Enjoying a little jaunt down Amnesia Lane?
You're just jealous of my rocket car.
You got me! I've always wanted to strap into that death trap.
So I've done this before too.